and it was summer of '42 was when I graduated, which World War II was on, and I was just about to be 18, and I joined it was actually a recruiting device for the Signal Corps, and so you would go to school. They started here with 200 people, and then they'd eliminate 50 each semester, and you'd go for a year studying radar. So you go for a year, you'd have to see the general manager. And I said, well, where is he? She said, oh, he's right down the hall. It was a lot easier in those days, I guess. I walked down the hall, and I walk in there, and there's a big burly guy sitting there with bushy eyebrows at the table, and I walk in, and he looks up over his glasses and says, who the hell are you? What do you want? And I said, well, I thought I might be able to get some kind of job, maybe part-time. He looked at me and he says, no, you got a little squeaky voice, he says, and you're too young, and we don't have anything here for you. And he says, I said, oh, well, okay. I kicked the ground. I started to walk out, and he says, and besides, he says, you have to have an FCC license, he says. Third-class license. We use combo people here. So I walked back and I pulled these licenses. I said, you mean one of these? And I laid a first phone and a second telegraph and a ham license. And he looked up and he says, son, you are hired. And I said, and he came around, he put his arm around me, and he says, come with me. So we walked into the next room, and that was the merchandise mart. It's still there, I think, the AM KSAN. We walked over into the transmitter room, and here were these big metal boxes about this big and so high, about 3 of them. It was only a 250 watt station. And he says, can you tune one of these things? And I says, well, I think so. And I look, he says, see that sign up there? And I look up there, and there's a big sign that it made from what you see in the butcher shops, the paper, the wide paper, and it was put across the top of the transmitter, and it was scrawled on there with some kind of marking pen or paint, what they used in those days, and all it said was, if the damn thing works, leave it alone. So I said, but why are you hiring me? He says, because, he says, I am operating illegally. He says, all my engineers have been drafted, and with that first-class telephone license you got on my wall, I'm legal again. So a lot of people ask me, how'd you get started in radio? And they're expecting some sort of, like some kind of radio thing that I did that was so good. But that was it. It was that first phone that got me on the air.
What was in the merchant
service at the time? She came to San Francisco, and I was living there with her. And after I got on the air, I started asking for letters. Now in those days, we couldn't talk back and forth with anyone on the air. They didn't have the equipment. So I had people call me and tell me for requests and stuff like I do now, except I'd get somebody on the phone and say, hello, who's this? She'd say, Mary? She'd say her name, and I'd say, oh, this is Mary. So I would echo whatever she said, or he said, So I started doing that. And so I had these 5 letters in my hand at home, and I was looking at the letters, and my sister's boyfriend says, what do you got there? I said, well, these are just some letters. He said, well, how come you have letters? I said, well, I was on the radio, and I asked people to write in. He said, let me see those. So he looks at them. He says, do you know this girl? And I said, no. I said, she just wrote in. He said, so he winks at me. He says, get to know her. And I said, why? How do you know that from the letter? He says, because I've studied handwriting. He says, I'm a handwriting, I'm not an expert, but I've studied several books, especially one. And he says, you can tell from the handwriting, that this would be somebody for you to know. At the time, I'm still a virgin. Well, I don't know. So I go on the air that night, and I said, I've got a letter here, and I can remember her name, by the way. I said, I've got a letter here from Merle Gapoff in the Mission District, and I said, if you're listening, give me a call. Boom, there goes the telephone. And she's her. And she says, blah, 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 I like you, and I like you you're nice on the radio, and I'd like to meet you. And I says, well, I get off at midnight. She says, well, I'll bring us some coffee. And I says, well, you know, how old are you? And she says, well, I don't know, 16 or whatever she was, 17, very young. And so I said, okay, well, I'll come downstairs because you can't get in the building. So I go downstairs, and there she is in the car with 2 cups of coffee. So I get in the car, and we drink our coffee, and all of a sudden, I see her looking me up and down, kind of like that, you know? And I never seen anybody do that to me before, you know? And so we put our coffee down, and she comes over closer, looks at me again, and she jumps on me and grabs me and pushes me down the seat, starts kissing me. And I mean, heavy, you know? And I don't know what to do about all this. Anyway, you know, it wasn't as bad as it sounds. It didn't go much further than that, and that night. And so I thought to myself, you know, business has a lot of fringe benefits. I love being on the radio, but no girls ever paid any attention to me because I'm small, and in high school they were all a couple of years older than me, and you know, I was like, you know, I was invisible, let's put it that way. So I thought it was pretty good business, and it turned out to be that way. RKD, which is now Clear Channel station, the one that had Air America, I think. Now, 1150. Yeah, that went bye-bye, I guess. But anyway, yeah, that's where I went. So got a job from this guy that had, he was brokering the time from midnight to 5 in the morning. And I got a job on the air from midnight to 5, and then I'd have to go out and sell spots. I could sell 50 spots for $49.50. I told Bob Moore that story. He says, that's what we're doing now. Job, and while I was doing that job, I was looking at the phone book, you know, to find people to call and go and sell time to, and I see this 24-hour drive-in called Scribner's. We are open 24 hours a day. Well, we're on the air midnight to 5, so I call him up, and he says, how much are your spots? And I said, less than $1 a piece. He said, come on out and see me. So I go out and see him, and he says, yeah, he says, I'll buy some spots. So he bought a package, and he says, well, who does the show? Do you do? I said, I do. And he says, why can't we do a show from Scribner's Drive-In? This is midnight now, 1949. Wow. So I said, I can do that. I'm a radio engineer. I know how to do it. So I go and see the manager of KRLA, an agency guy I knew sent me over there, and I go to see the manager. His name was Loyal King, and he owned KXLA at the time, KXLA. So I tell him about this, and I said, well, you know, I was doing this show before, and I know I can do it because here's my license, and I can broadcast from the drive-in late at night, and Mr. Scrivener will pay you $1,000 a month, and you'll be able to still put your commercials on. He had a real high voice, and he says, well, okay, Art, but he says, be careful that somebody doesn't grab the microphone and say, bullshit. And I said, I'll be real careful. We didn't have any tape then. So that's how I got the job at the drive-in late at night, midnight to 4 in the morning. And that's what I did from 1949 to 1955.
So your nights were consumed with doing the show from Scribner's, then going out and selling all day long?
No, not there anymore, because I went to a different station, because KRK...
To 1110.
I went to 1110, KXLA. And I stayed there with that drive-in show for 4 years, and during that period, Scribner's went from 2 drive-ins to 12. And they became very popular. And then I went to work at KFWB. They offered me a job there at a place called Larry Finley's.
Oh, God.
We broadcast from the Macombo and the Ciros. And so I talked to all the movie stars who were in the lobby as they'd come in. I guess I talked to every big star from the golden years you could think of. And just as they'd come in, hello, how are you, Mr. Gable, or whatever. There was one girl he was with one night, Virginia Gray, who was a character actress, and I talked to her. As they'd come in, we'd talk for a few minutes. Later they got to know me by my name, and I always felt good. Somebody'd come in, Gary Cooper or somebody, and say, hi, Art. I'm like, well, made you feel good, you know, this little Mormon guy from Utah. Gary Cooper's called me by my first name.